We thank you all again for gathering with us today, and thank you for taking the time to learn about being brave in our session. And so we can begin. Today, we're going to be focusing on being brave, grounding ourselves in our ancestral resilience. Today, we hope to discuss and discover what it means to be brave. The session will help you through some grounding techniques that tap into our strength, our resilience for American Indians and Alaska Natives. This will be an opportunity to learn and adapt these methods for mindfulness in your communities. The event is brought to you by the National American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under the K-12 School Mental Health Supplement Project. We are located at the University of Iowa and a part of the National MHTTC network serving American Indian and Alaska Native communities across the United States, including Alaska. We do provide technical assistance for American Indian and Alaska Native communities and schools, as well as having several ongoing initiatives and projects for these same communities. The National American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Transfer Center is supported by a grant from the SAMHSA. The content of this event is a creation of the presenter, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian Alaska Native MHTTC. Before we begin, we have a few ground rules. This session is being recorded, so please be mindful of that, and will be posted at the end of this week for your review at a later time. We are going to also ask that if you have questions, you're welcome to post them in the chat room, chat box, or raise your hand. Throughout the presentation, our presenter, Tanea Winder, will stop occasionally and invite you to share some of your thoughts. So please be mindful of that as well. I want to remind you to please mute yourselves unless you're speaking, obviously, so that you have an opportunity to share when called upon or when you're willing to share your thoughts. Also, at the end of the presentation, we'll be putting a link in the chat room for the slides that'll be coming later to you, but there'll be a specific link for evaluation for the GIPRA. This is an opportunity for you to help in our survey for our center, our funders, and to ensure that our events are beneficial to those who attend. Your participation in these surveys is voluntary, but we would really appreciate you taking a few minutes to help us by completing it. You may skip any questions that you're not wanting to answer, and all your responses will be kept confidential and cannot be linked to you. If you have questions about completing the survey, you're welcome to reach out to myself or any of our staff members. Although we are gathered virtually, it is important to know that we take time to acknowledge the land and to pay respect to the Indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken and inhabited. Please take a moment to read this land acknowledgement, which was created by 3 members of our team, Ella and Keely Driscoll and Sean Bear. We have several members of our team joining us today. We have our co-director, Teresa Brewington. She works for the Native Center for Behavioral Health at the University of Iowa. She is the co-director of the National American Indian and Alaska Native Mental Health TTC K-12 School Supplement, as well as the co-director for the National American Indian and Alaska Native Child Traumatic Stress Initiative, Category 2. She's an enrolled member of the Kahari tribe and a descendant of the Lumi tribe. She holds a master's in educational leadership, an MBA, and has 36 credit hours towards a master's in counseling. She's held several positions as a director at mental health agencies and worked as a school guidance counselor, serving primarily Hispanic and Latino students. She's also served as a foster care agency supervisor, where she worked directly with the Salt River Pima Indian community, placing Native American children in foster homes. Her last place to work was as an elementary school principal for the Meskwaki Nation, located in Iowa, where she currently resides. Today, I'll be your moderator, and I am Dr. Allison Bays, and I serve as a program manager in the same program. I'm a member of the Tapilam Powhatan Nation, and my research crosses over and creation of programs focusing on students and their families, focusing on academic success for them for almost 25 years. I share my expertise with each of you in education with K through 12 and higher ed settings. A lot of my research is among Native populations that implements the best practices from a Native cultural lens. My services have gone across tribes, across Indian country, and is intended to strengthen and empower families, as well as individuals and their communities. We have several graduate research assistants who also serve in our office. McKenna Clark is one of them, serving in the K through 12 program. She's currently pursuing a master's degree in the University of Iowa's school counseling program. Kate Press is also a master's student at the University of Iowa in the professional school counseling program. She serves in the K through 12 program alongside McKenna. Today is our featured speaker, Tanea Winder. She's an author, a singer, a songwriter, a motivational speaker who comes from an intertribal lineage of Southern Ute, Pyramid Lake Paiute, and Duckwater Shoshone nations, where she's an enrolled citizen. She is a 2016 National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, 40 under 40, emerging American Indian leader. She also co-founded As Us, a space for women of the world, which is a literary magazine publishing works by BIPOC women. She holds a BA in English from Stanford University, an MFA in creative writing from the University of New Mexico. She has various poetry collections included here for you to read, and her specialties include youth and women empowerment, healing trauma through art, creative writing workshops, and so much more. And so I welcome Mrs. Tanea Winder. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So, hi, Mike, Nunania Tanea Winder, Nunania Tumut Wachich Mamach. I'm so grateful to be here with you all to share space. Thank you again, Betty, for the prayer and song to kick us off in a good way. So as was mentioned, today's session is about being brave and just really diving into that. What does it mean to be brave? And so it's going to be an interactive workshop. So if you have something to write with, whether you want to type or if you have just a pen and paper, I know I like to do it that way to feel it in my hands. Just go ahead and take a moment to grab something, because in today's workshop we're going to be practicing these things, because I think it's so important to walk our talk, and before we ask those we work with to do something, to just try it ourselves so we know what it's like to feel maybe anxious writing or to feel excited about writing. For me, I grew up on a really small reservation. Whenever I go to like a city, even though I have like my smartphone and it can tell me how to get wherever I'm going if I'm lost, like I need to be shown how to do something. Take me on the bus, take me on the metro, and then after that I'll feel more brave to do it. So that's why for me, whenever I do these workshops, I really like to just get us practice doing those things, because for me I think it's really important. So just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing today. Dr. Bays mentioned we'll be doing some grounding exercises and just really unpacking, what does it mean to be brave? I really like to put into practice those grounding activities, and these will draw on cultural references, things such as calling our ancestors for support, reminding ourselves of that strength and resilience that we all carry in our bones. Nowadays, whether it's in the classroom or workshops, people talk a lot about making sure we create safe spaces. And I've always had a difficult time with saying, this is a safe space, because we can never guarantee safety. We never know if it's going to bring up something in somebody. We don't know. We can't guarantee everyone feeling safe or not being triggered. So I like to think of creating a braver space, a space where we all feel we can be brave enough to take those chances, where our students or community can feel brave enough to use their voices, to speak up, to share, or to ask for what they need. So with that in mind, I look forward to being brave with you all today in this workshop, and I hope that you're able to trust me in this presentation and the exercises I've included, and that you'll engage with me. You'll engage with each other when it's writing and sharing. And again, any of these techniques, whether you do things in person or if you're having to do things in Zoom for your students or your community, feel free to. This is for you to learn. These are tools. Our communal knowledge is our shared knowledge. So you can take these exercises and run with it, or you can adapt them to your needs. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions, but feel free to just ask them throughout. I'll do my best to keep an eye on them. And then we'll also have space at the end for people to just share what you experienced, share any feedback. But again, feel free to just post those questions throughout as they come up, and I'll scroll back and try to get to them at the end. So try not to stress out if I don't answer your question right away. I will get to it eventually, but I know for some of us, when it pops in your head, you don't want to forget it. So if you need to type it in, that's completely fine. So some of the things I hope that you walk away today with, the things that you can take with you, are just understanding the importance of check-ins and stretching. I'll talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. Expand on our understanding of bravery and fear, and identify ways that reflective writing can be used to help students, staff, community, and use them as a way to understand resilience. So we're going to start with the getting grounded. It's always good to start off with that. And the song and the prayer, that I know that's another way to ground as well. Always starting off things with acknowledging that. I know that helped me feel grounded. But right now, I'm just going to ask everybody to just take a minute and drop into the chat how you're feeling right now. It can, and if you don't have access to the chat, if you're somewhere tuning in from your phone, just hold it in your head or say it out loud to yourself. But yeah, just drop into the chat, how you're feeling. It could be about this workshop. It could be about today. It could be about anything in your life. We have some coming in: blessed, grateful, content. It's a good one. Relaxed, blessed, calm and peaceful, powerful, loving, connected, achy, feeling good, satisfied, hopeful, ready. That's a good one. Excited, a little overwhelmed, tired, blessed, overwhelmed, content and excited, blessed, tired, fun, lonely, motivated. So you can read some of those as they're coming into: tired, a little lost, content, uncertain but hopeful, feeling frustrated, hopeful, happy, motivated. Thank you all for sharing some of those things. Overwhelmed, preparing for a job transfer. Thank you all for sharing those. Go ahead and keep writing if you haven't had a chance to share yet. But I love just starting off anything I do, whether I'm checking in with coworkers or staff, or if I'm leading a session or I'm working with students, because I feel like so much of this world just wants us to be in this productive kind of capitalistic mindset where we just produce, go, go, go. And we don't always get to check in on just that human level. First, we are human beings, we're people, we bring our whole selves to work. Whether or not we're allowed to bring our whole selves to this work, we do bring all of those things with us. We have these things on our mind. Our students and the people we work with have things that are going on in their mind, and naming has such power. I was doing a session a couple weeks ago with some Indigenous people from Chicago, and one of them was telling me how her tribe, they gave a name to coronavirus in their language, because once they named it, then they could deal with it. And I was just thinking about this activity that I like to do, just the power of naming something. It's hard to check in. We don't always check in. I know even when my own mother asks me, how are you feeling? I say, I'm okay. And she'll say, okay, it's not a feeling. How are you feeling? We put up all these walls, our students, community, people, we're just so used to protecting ourselves. So then you have to strip those away and say, okay, how am I feeling? I'm feeling excited. I'm feeling sad. I'm just, giving it, naming it, taking some of that energy out of it and allowing yourself to redirect it somewhere else. So that's why I believe in starting out a lot of these meetings or activities with, again, naming. And so with that in mind, some of the activities and reflections we're going to share today might feel like a bit of a stretch. So I want us to just take a minute wherever you're at and just stretch. If you haven't gotten out of your chair yet, maybe you want to stand up and stretch, or if you do yoga, maybe you want to try to touch your toes, or if you want to just even be in your chair, just stretch your hands up and maybe rotate your wrists. If you want to stretch out to the side, or if you need to stretch your back, just whatever your body's telling you or whatever you feel you need to stretch right now. Even if it's just your neck. Thinking of our relatives who might not be able to move their bodies in other ways, just even your neck. And so just think about for a second, what does it feel like to stretch? For some of us, it wakes us up. It can feel good, even though it can be uncomfortable at times. It gets our blood flowing. And I just want you to remember that feeling of stretching when you're in situations in your life where you may be asked to stretch beyond your comfort zone, where you might be asked to do something or a new task, or we're teaching new tasks, skills to the people we work with. Like, it might feel like a stretch. So keep that feeling in mind when you're doing some of these exercises, these writing exercises and reflections in this session, that even if stretching is uncomfortable sometimes, it does feel good. It does help us reach new places, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Stretching too is one way I feel, honors our bodies, honors our vessels. Our bodies are our vessels. They carry so much knowledge, so much heritage, so much strength, and just so much, organs and things we need to take care of. And, for me as an Indigenous person, it's important to start with those grounding activities because it brings us into the room, right? Most of the time, these grounding exercises, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, they bring us into our vessels. And by vessels, I mean our bodies. And it can become easy to get disconnected. We're on our phones, our laptops, our devices. But in working in these virtual spaces, we're not always remembering to take that time to honor the physical spaces we live in, the bodies that we exist in. And so just as there are 6 directions, north, east, south, west, earth, and sky, those are directions I hold in my mind. And I'm always thinking, how do we connect, as an Indigenous person, how do I connect what's going on in the world with myself, the earth with my body? So I started thinking about, okay, the 6 directions of our being: emotional, mental, social, physical, spiritual, environmental, these different parts of ourselves. So when you think about the 6 directions, some people, might pray to the different directions. Some people might just acknowledge or honor those directions in their lives. But how are we honoring the directions of ourselves? How do you honor your spiritual self? How are you honoring your emotional self, your mental self? So that leads us to our first writing activity. So this is the question I'm going to ask everyone to just write on, and it's always doing what you're comfortable doing, but that little stretch too, so if you want to just think about it, but I think the best part is writing it out, and we're going to answer these questions. What are some ways you honor your vessel or your 6 directions? How do you honor your mind? How do you honor your spirit? And I know balance is so hard. It's so hard to work and take care of your home and do all these different things, like we might neglect some of those parts of ourselves. So this exercise is not meant to make you feel guilty or shame if you're like, I'm not honoring myself. You can answer the question, what are some ways you would like to honor your vessel? What are some ways you would like to honor your spirit? What are some ways you would like to honor the environment around you? So we're going to spend 3 minutes reflecting on this and writing. I'm going to do my little timer, but just think about that question and write it down. What are some ways you honor your body? What are some ways you honor your mind? All right, that was about 3 minutes. For some of us, that might have went really fast. Some of us who are busy writing, some of us, it might have felt long. But again, when you're doing these in person and you're putting it into practice, you can better gauge the room, right? You can see who's still writing, who's finished, if people need more time. And that's another way to use this activity too, is if you're working with, if you want to build on it, maybe your first day working with people doing this activity, you say, okay, we're going to focus on the mind. How do we take care of our mind? Then maybe the next day it's how do we honor our body? And maybe the next day it's how do we honor our spirit? So you can break it up in different ways too when you're wanting to do these activities too, to just more guide the experience. So now we're going to talk a little bit about being brave outside and inside. So go ahead, and we're going to use the chat function again. What do you think when you think of being brave? Do you think of a person? What kinds of characteristics or qualities does a brave person have? So let's just drop some of those in the chat. What does it mean to be brave? What kind of characteristics does a brave person have? Take risks, trust in oneself. I like that. Vulnerability, speaking one's truth, outgoing, brave, good-hearted, do the right thing even when it's scary, express honesty, outgoing, standing up for others, face fears. They like change. Yes, that's a hard one. Brene Brown, yes, being vulnerable, outgoing, resilience, going through challenges. Being brave means being comfortable and sharing feelings, passionate, risks, standing up for what is right, even if you're alone, withstanding obstacles or tasks at hand. I think of a brave person who takes a healthy risk. I like that, healthy risk. Try new activities upfront, healthy risks again, overcoming discomfort, being humble, stepping up, authenticity, trust the process, resilient, open-minded to change, being able to stand out, positivity, staying open, being uncomfortable. I like that, staying open. So much of, when we have anxiety or fear, I picture it as like these closed fists, and if you're going around in life with these closed fists, you're not going to catch all of those good things that come. Being compassionate, looking from different points of views. Our veterans, dad, uncles, nephews, and nieces that are served and are serving. Steps out of the rut they're in, protecting what and who they love. Showing up for yourself and others. Being the waymaker, overcoming. Assertive, outspoken. A mentor. That's great. Thank you all so much too. I hope hearing some of those things reminded you all of how brave you are. I know so many of us in these sessions probably, you have a lot of those characteristics. Even just showing up today, doing these activities, that's being brave too. Stretching, your learning skills. I think all of those things count as being brave. So before we move on to the next part, what we're going to do now is I'm going to have everybody take a few minutes now that you've seen all of these different characteristics and we've read some of them aloud on what makes a person brave. I'm going to ask you all to write about a time you were brave. And you can put in as much detail as you want about that moment or experience. So we're going to write, when was the time that you were brave? Or that you felt brave, that you did some of those things. Maybe you were a mentor, maybe you spoke up for people, maybe you did the right thing even when it was hard. So we're going to free write. We'll do this one for 4 minutes about a time that you were brave. And make sure you take care of yourself in these exercises too. Don't go back to a memory that might be triggering or too painful. Stick with something that you're on the other side of, that you have enough space and distance and perspective on, that you feel safe enough to revisit for this exercise. So I'll drop it into the chat for people who need it as well, but we're going to write about a time you were brave. Yeah, it is kind of hard because you have to think of an obstacle you have faced or overcome. And being brave, it doesn't always have to be a big thing, like a big trauma or a big hardship. Being brave, it can be showing up in smaller ways too, I think the same thing happens with leadership skills, right? When we ask people to say, write about a time you were a leader, and people might say, but I'm not a leader, but even things like getting up and doing the dishes or going to work, like all of those things are being brave. Like it's all of those things are leadership. Like it shows those who look up to you how to follow a good path. So maybe even being brave is, try to think about bravery in that way too. So I'm going to set my little timer and just write about a time when you felt brave. And you don't have to put it in the chat. It can be something you just write on your paper, something for you. Great, thank you, everybody. And we have some in the chat that I'm just going to share. Asking my mother-in-law for her daughter's hand in marriage. Writing my progressive disclosure of child sexual abuse at Indian residential school and supporting other survivors as they told their story to the legal counsel. Presenting to a group on a topic I was barely familiar with, but everything was on PowerPoint, which was 3 hours long, which I didn't preview at all until displaying it. Being neutral and stepping up when it comes to ethical decision-making for a group, told to do a last-minute presentation, setting healthy boundaries with family and friends, saying no to a person who asked for money because I knew the money would be used for drugs. I love this person, but can't contribute in this way. It killed me inside to say no, but I love him enough to say no. 20 years of sobriety, suffered my first and worst relapse, and I shared it publicly. Wow, did I ever struck at the nerves. Wow, did I ever struck at the nerves and within people whom are ashamed in their use or using. Facilitating a women's empowerment group for domestic violence and telling my story to individuals who knew and didn't know, and just being that person they could come to with trust and respect, vice versa. Exploring your personal deficits and making a change to be better person. Taking it one day at a time, the creators, learn to take it one day at a time, the creators with you. Can feel the fear, just little old Brandy presents, reaching out to ones I knew walked that walk. Vocalizing my needs and boundaries to loved ones, coming out with my sexuality to my family and friends and losing them, and finding out that I am loved by other relatives and new, being brave for my own self. Again, thank you all for being brave and doing this and going back to those spaces and writing and thinking and remembering, for sharing, for those who shared. Being brave is hard, but I think sometimes when, we're helping other people, it's always helpful to remind yourself of those times that you were brave, that you have that strength, that you have that resilience, that, you've gotten here to where you are today. When those anxieties or worries or fears come up, to remind yourself, like, I made the decisions that got me here to this place where I'm doing good, where I'm making decisions, where I'm helping myself, where I'm helping others, where I'm saying no when I need to, and I'm setting boundaries. And to know, like, I trust myself. I got here. I trust myself. I trust myself to make good decisions moving forward. And life, this work, this heart work that we do, it asks a lot of us. And so if you need to remind yourself that you're brave and that you can do this work, just do this activity sometimes. Or, if you have people you work with who are struggling with taking those next steps, like, let's just remind ourselves of times that we have been brave. I feel like a lot of times we can focus on the negative things or the struggles or obstacles ahead of ourselves, but it's good. Being brave can mean celebrating ourselves too. Like, let's be brave enough to celebrate ourselves. You can still be humble and celebrate yourself as well too, how far you've come, the things you've overcome. And I think a lot of times when we think about being brave, you can't help but think about fear sometimes. So I'm going to tell you a story about fear. It was this event. I had just given like a really big talk. I have a lot of anxiety as a person and just always questioning myself. And so after this talk, which was like, it went well, I should have been like, wow, I'm proud of myself. It went well. The practice paid off, but my mind immediately goes to, what did I say? Did I say something wrong? What are people thinking? Like, fear becomes so big. It can get so big so quickly. And I was talking to this mentor of mine about it. And she said, well, you know what fear stands for, right? And I said, no, what does fear stand for? She says, false expectations about reality. And so I had to think about that for a minute. False expectations about reality. All of the things that aren't true that I'm expecting to happen, and creating this like huge reality of all the worst things that could happen, like, and just limiting myself from doing anything, paralyzing myself because I'm thinking about everything that can go wrong. And I started thinking, wow, like, she really blew up my understanding or thinking about fear and how it's tied to my anxiety. But I thought, I'm going to do something to make this my own, how I want to think about fear. So I came up with this acronym: fiercely embrace ancestral resilience. Because I wanted to remind myself, anytime I felt afraid, anytime I felt fear, I wanted to not be afraid, but I wanted to embrace that resilience, embrace that strength, embrace my ancestors, because I think, sometimes, when we're in those reflective spaces, it's like, yes, I know my ancestors are with me. And, ancestors, we all have them regardless of our race or background. We all have beloved relatives or people who, I believe want the best for us in this world, in this time that we exist in. So I thought, I'm going to do that. Whenever I'm afraid, I'm not going to like close myself off, but instead I'm going to open myself up to embrace, and not just passively embrace, but I'm going to strongly and fiercely embrace the ancestral resilience that I know that I have. So now that we can think about fear in this different way, we're going to do our next activity. And what that is, and I'll type it into the chat, is we are going to write a breakup letter to our old fears, or to our anxieties, or to our worries. What would you say? And this one, just you can write on your paper. And it can just be a reflection too. A lot of times with these activities, there's no wrong way to do them. Just whatever comes to mind while we're talking about these things, when we're talking about fear or anxiety or worries, or to think about fear differently. If your mind is leading you on a path where you just want to reflect on that a little bit, like just follow that direction. There's no wrong way to do this. But for those who would like some guidance, this is the prompt that we're going to write to. You can write a breakup letter to your old fears, to anxieties, to worries. What would you say to those fears? And even, what will you let go of? What do you want to let go of that you're holding on to? Does fear have a purpose in your life? If fear is its own spirit or relative, how do you want that relative to live in your world or function in your world? And we'll do that for 3 minutes. All right, thank you, everybody. I like the people sharing songs too. Maybe I'll add that to my no fear playlist. But Kim had said, I love this idea of creating a boundary of communication with my own anxiety. And I like that too. When I work with younger people, sometimes I'll say like, you know, if when you hear those anxious thoughts or worry or fear, give it a funny voice, you know, make it some crazy cartoon character whenever you're hearing those thoughts, like, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, why should I put myself out there? You know, and then when you start thinking about it that way, it's less scary. That's one technique that I like for trying to help create that boundary. And then Brandy was saying that fear is, in their language, you know, a dark spirit that we should never let into our hearts or our minds or our lives. You know, my mother always says that that words are like seeds, and you have to be careful of the words you say, because you're like planting it, you're giving it life. So even be careful of the things you think. So I try to think about that too. And I think about, you know, fear or worries and anxieties, like not to say it, not to spend too much time thinking on it, because I don't want it to take root in my life. But at the same time, you know, just completely ignoring those things, you can't just stuff it all in the closet and then one day it explodes and next thing you're yelling at somebody for like spilt coffee or something, when it's not really about the coffee, but it's about all of those other things you let built up. But just to more acknowledge it, like those, like you're holding balloons and, you know, I see you and thank you for showing up, not welcome in my life, let it go, you know. And then we got some more songs in there. People are saying, face everything and rise. Nice. That's a good one, Betty. Another way to think about fear. Face everything and rise. Dear fear, I'm not sorry we have to break up. You always try to make me stressed out and nervous, but you are just making yourself look back. We're over. Yes, that's awesome. Don't always believe what you think when it comes to anxiety. Thank you. Thank you, fear. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I'm at. It's challenging, but getting a lot of knowledge and wisdom from it. Yes, fear can be paralyzing. I'm going to share with you all a story about me trying to let go of that fear, and a time that I had to be brave. So this is you know, I like it was said earlier, you know, I do a lot of writing and speaking engagements and things, but I always get the most nervous when I'm asked to do things for my people or my community, because it's just a bigger responsibility, I guess. I want to do it right. You know, I'm held accountable by my community. I don't ever want to do anything that would bring shame upon my community or my tribes or my family. So when I'm asked to do something specifically for my people, it always gives me some of those anxieties and worries and fears. And, you know, a few years ago, I was asked to write this poem for our tribe's Tri-Ute Youth Conference. And so I wrote this poem, and, you know, when I gave it to them, they really liked it. And it was pretty cool because they asked if they could put it on the wall of our tribe's rec center by the basketball courts, which I love because I was that person trying to play basketball in high school because all my friends were doing it and I was really bad at basketball. I wish I had been braver and been like, do theater or go to the band. But no, I was trying to do basketball. So, and I was really bad. I could never get on a good team. So I never felt like my place on the court. But now this poem I was asked to write as an adult is now by the basketball court on our tribe's rec center. And that made me so happy. Like that was better for me than being published in like any huge magazine. Like it's on the wall of my tribe's gym. And, you know, a few years later, I was asked to submit some poems to this big magazine called Poetry Magazine. They were doing like a first ever youth issue, young readers issue. So they asked me to send some poems, and I thought I should just kind of revisit that poem and edit it, shorten it, and submit it. And they ended up publishing it. And so that's this poem right here. It's called Being. And I'll read it here in a second. But, you know, and I was happy when that poem got published. It was really exciting. And then another year later, I don't know if you'll have heard of, Highlights magazine. They have it in different doctors' offices and things like that. I used to love Highlights magazine, all the word searches and stuff. Highlights magazine reached out to me, and this never happens. You usually, as a writer, you send to file, send to file, you get rejected probably 100 times before you get accepted once. So this was the first time someone had reached out to me, like, we want to publish that poem. And I thought, wow, like, I can't imagine being a young Native kid in a doctor's office looking at highlights and seeing like, hey, there's a Native lady in there. So I was so happy. But if I hadn't been brave enough to just like take those first steps and write the poem, and like, anything you put out in the universe like that just takes a life of its own. So this is that poem. And you can find it online if you ever want to use it too, just Being, Tanea Winder. I hope this poem comes up in that search, because that'd be a weird search if something else came up, Being, Tanea Winder. But the poem, wake up, greet the sun and pray, burn cedar, sweetgrass, sage, sacred herbs to honor the lives we've been given. For we have been gifted these ways since the beginning of time. Remember, when you step into the arena of your life, think about those who stand beside you, next to, and with you. Your ancestors are always in your corner, along with your people. When we enter this world, we are born hungry. Our spirits long for us to live out our traditions that have been passed down for generations: prayer, ceremony, dance, language, our ways of being. Never forget, you were put on this earth for a reason. Honor your ancestors. Be a good relative. And so I just want to say that last part again, just to you all, never forget you were put on this earth for a reason, and that our ancestors are always with us. So whenever you need to be reminded of that, this next prompt is for you, or when you need to remind people of that they're not alone. That's what this next prompt is. After I had first graduated college, some of my friends and I were having like just a grown-up like session at my house. We're like, what if we could change the world? What would we do? Could we do a nonprofit? We're just doing a bunch of different things. And anyway, we went to sleep that night. We woke up, there were these Post-it notes all over the wall. And I was like, what? And one of my friends, he said, our ancestors came to visit us last night. They wanted to come to our sleepover too, and they left us these messages. So he had gotten up in the middle of the night and he had written out all of these lovely affirmations and things that we needed to hear. And it's always stuck with me. So one of my favorite prompts to gift to people to use for themselves or whoever you work with is that, imagine your ancestors came to visit you in the night, and when you woke up, you had a letter from them to you. What did they say in that letter? And for some of us who are reconnecting or aren't always able to connect as easily with that like idea that our ancestors are always with us or they came to visit you, you can flip the prompt and you can write a letter to your ancestors. And if you were to do that, what would you say to them? So that's going to be our next prompt. And again, I'll type it in the chat, but for those of you who want to get started, I'll read it. It says, if your ancestors came while you're sleeping, they leave you a note. What do they say? Write a letter from one of your ancestors to yourself. Have them give you the advice you need about a situation you're struggling with. Or, as much as we love our families, they're not always able to support us or say what we need to say. So have your ancestors do it, have them praise you for something you're proud of, or have them give you advice for something you need, anything you can think of. But that's what we're going to do for this next 3 minutes, is to write that letter either from your ancestors to you, or you can write to them about something you might need guidance with, or something you want to celebrate. All right. So hopefully that's something that you can use for yourself, or again, just with people you work with. That's one of my favorite ones to do is that prompt. So I love thinking about ancestors and reminding myself of those things. So one of the last things I'll share, getting towards the end, and then again, open it up for questions and reflections. So I wanted to just share a story from my mother's homeland, and it's about igniting your fire. And it has to do with some of the things we've been talking about, with being brave, with letting go of fear, with thinking about our ancestors. So if any of you have ever been to the Pyramid Lake Paiute Reservation in Nixon, Nevada, you'll have seen Pyramid Lake. Maybe you know about the Stone Mother. So this is the Cliff Notes, abridged, extremely abridged version of the story. If you want to see and listen to the full version, my uncle Ralph Burns tells it in our language and then English. He has a YouTube video of it, but the short version is that, a long time ago, the original man and original woman had 4 children, and when they were little, they got along, they played well together. And as they got older, they kept arguing and fighting, and they said, if you guys keep fighting, I'm going to separate you. And so, time passed. And of course, as we humans do, they kept arguing and not getting along. So they said, all right, let's send 2 of you to the north and 2 of you to the south. When you get to where you're going, make sure you light your fire so that we know you're okay. Days passed, time passed, and they see a fire lit in one direction, but they never see a fire lit in the other direction. And the mother was so saddened by their loss that she cried so many tears, she created this saltwater lake in the middle of the desert, and she turned to stone. And she sits there, waiting for her children to return. And when I was little, I used to relate so much to that story because, like many of us, in community, sometimes, you see and experience a lot of things early on. And I had experienced a lot of loss in my community that I just felt so hardened, desensitized. I felt like I couldn't cry when I was supposed to. And I thought, is this what I've inherited from my ancestors? Like, am I too made of stone? And so I used to project a lot of my anger onto the Stone Mother. And, many of us grow up learning how to swim in this lake. I go back as often as I can. And I think when I was in my 20s, I was visiting and swimming, and I'd just been going through something. And then I thought, wow, like I'm literally swimming in tears. And then it hit me. I thought, wow, she gave us the greatest gift a relative could give their children. She gave us this tool for healing. Because if you think about it, isn't it like a metaphor for life? Like, unfortunately, none of us will know a life without pain or tears or sadness, but you can learn to swim in it. You can learn not to drown in those things. And so I thought, wow, she gave us this tool, because when you don't want to drown in your sadness, you swim. And sometimes when life hits you so hard, you feel like you can't swim, you can tread water and catch your breath and figure out which direction you're going to swim next. And if life has wiped you out so much you feel like you can't even tread water, you can float on your back. You can float on your back, get that reprieve, rest, breathe, and figure out where you're going to swim to next. And I just felt such gratitude. And then I started thinking again about the story. And I thought, there was that part where they said they wanted their kids to light their fire so they knew they were okay. And I know a lot of us, for me, I struggle a lot with being proud of the things I've done because I want to be a role model for others, but I don't want to be too big-headed, too cocky, So how do you balance that? Being proud, but staying humble. And so I think about that metaphor, like lighting the fire. Like, we talked about ancestors, how each of us have them. And I think our ancestors want us to light our fire while we're here on this earth so that they know that we're okay and that we owe it to them to light our fire. So I just want to leave you with, that, thinking about that. What is your fire? How is your fire reflected? What does it mean to light your fire? What does it mean to share your fire? And, I tell people I work with or visit, like, sharing your fire, lighting your fire can mean so many things. You don't have to be this famous TikTok superstar, although that might be some people's path, but lighting your fire can be being a good mentor, being a good teacher, being a good, kind, patient mother, father, parent, auntie, any of those things. Whatever makes your spirit come alive, your heart come alive, like that is lighting your fire. And to find different ways so that, you can do that help you light your fire. And I like sharing that story because it reminds me of who I am and where I come from. And I'm sure there's stories from the communities you're a part of, or you work in, or you live in, that can ground people in knowing those things. Because just as we said earlier, and hopefully experienced earlier, the power of naming those emotions, the power of naming those fears, there's a power when you know who you are, there's power in that too. I recently heard this elder saying, I know who I am. Do you? And he was saying this in reference to some people can be afraid of us because we know our power, we know where we come from, and we know who we are. And we want, those we work with to feel that power too. Like, we want to feel good about ourselves, to know those strengths and things that we carry with us. So with that, I just want to close us out with one final grounding exercise, and then I'll open it up to if people have questions or reflections. But for this last one, if you feel comfortable, and you're able to, just put your feet on the ground and close your eyes and just take some deep breaths. If you do have anxiety, sometimes we just breathe these short, shallow breaths into our chest, but breathe deep into your belly. Just take some deep breaths. And if your feet are flat on the ground, feel that energy of Mother Earth anchoring you. Feel your feet rooting in that power, that energy that connects us all. And then just, relax your shoulders, your hands, even relax your face. We hold a lot of tension in our face. And just think about, maybe some of the things these prompts or exercises might have brought up. Maybe you realize something new about yourself. Maybe you were reminded of some things. And just express gratitude to yourself, internally. Or even if you want to say it out loud to yourself, say thank you. Thank you for being here, for surviving, for fighting. You can even hug yourself if that feels right. But just, thank you all for being here, for making the time to be here to learn and be able to share these skills with all the people that are connected to us in our lives. And then go ahead and open your eyes, and I'm going to stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions or things you want to share. Feel free to drop it in the chat.
I really thought this was really good because my freshman year in college, my English instructor did something similar. She did a prompt where she had us look out the window and imagine everything that our ancestors were doing without buildings, roads, houses. Imagine living 200 years ago, free on his land, and like practicing all our virtues. How are we taking care of ourselves then? And compared to now, we don't have that calmness. We don't have the animals and clean water and all that compared. But I thought it was pretty cool. It reminded me of that exercise when I was in college.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Gabriel. I really like what your teacher did too, like just thinking about it, because I think we don't often think, how you're saying compare, like we don't often compare like then to now, and just how much those changes have impacted our health. So thank you. Anyone else, any questions, thoughts? You can also unmute yourself too if you'd like. Oh, that lake was Pyramid Lake. First, somebody who had asked, type it in the chat. And then Dr. Bays also dropped the link to the GPRA survey if you have a chance to click on that while you're still here in the Zoom. Is there anything else you needed to add, Dr. Bays, before?
Yes, I wanted to share, if I may, my last slide. If you could just pull it up, it should be in the screen that you have as well.
Oh, okay.
That'd be helpful. For those of you who came in late, I see some comments like that. And I know I admitted some folks late. Please know that this is being recorded, so we will post it on our YouTube channel for the Native Center for Behavioral Health. So you'll have access to the session, whether you were late or on time or you had to leave early. We understand some folks just joined us for the duration of their lunch hour or what they could allow themselves from their schedules. With the busyness going on, we appreciate everybody's time today. If you want to know more about the National American Indian and Alaska Native MHTTC for the K through 12 programming, we have our email addresses here for you to review and send us an email, give us suggestions for future workshops. If you have questions more about today's workshop and want to learn more, if you want to focus on looking at our program guide, we have the hyperlink for that also. If everything is provided on our website, if you go to the Native Center for Behavioral Health, MHTTC, K through 12, you'll be able to find us. We're the national center that serves specifically our American Indian and Alaska Native communities in the K through 12 setting. Educators, mental health professionals who serve our children and their families and their communities. It's really important that we extend our net, widen our net, and find people who are in need of services, find people who are in need of technical assistance. That's what we're here for, and this is who we serve. We can't thank you enough for joining us for today with Tanea Winder. She's going to be on for a little bit longer, so if you have more questions or you just wanted to share something that you learned today, this is a great opportunity for you to do that among your peers, among your support team, because we serve people all the way from Alaska to Florida. In the contiguous states, it's really important that we recognize the needs of our people and can share with each other. So I want to say thank you for sharing in the chat, jotting your thoughts down, came prepared to write your thoughts down, and just to share with our community.
Yep. So we do have time, again, if anyone has questions or reflections, or if you wrote something that you're like, I really feel like I want to share this, you can type it in the chat, you can unmute and read it to us. That is welcome as well.
Thank you, Tanea. Your youth, your information was very heartfelt by me, and I appreciate it. And your story and your cultural story that you shared about the lady who turned a stone and cried her tears in that lake, who created the lake with her tears. I appreciate it. I'm kind of going through a rough time personally, and you sincerely lifted my spirits up. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilberta. Thank you for sharing. And you're in our thoughts and prayers too. I'll put the story for the Stone Mother in the chat here in a second. So that's the link to my uncle, my great uncle Ralph Burns, and the story of the Stone Mother for folks who want to listen to the full version later. Well, thank you all for coming today and for the work you do for your communities and your people.
I think that's important to recognize that you've been brave just joining us today, being a part of the conversation, whether you were speaking or just listening. It takes us being brave to step out of our comfort zones and be in community with one another, even if we're virtual, even if we can't physically be in the room together, just being brave enough to hop on and listen and share. And I want to recognize everybody who was kind enough and willing enough to share your story. It's real important that we honor our experiences, good and bad. It makes us who we are in our journey. And Tanea did that really well for us today. I want to thank her for sharing her knowledge, her expertise, and the wisdom and her story. It's really important. In the chat box, I read many of your commentaries, and so many of you were so brave and sharing in a small little snippet of something that you've experienced. And I want to honor that. I want us all to look and honor and recognize the braveness in all of you. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate your time. Please reach out to our center if you would like to be a part of our listserv. If you want to find out more about what we can offer you for future sessions, if you want to learn more about Tanea and the workshops that she does, if you want to connect and network with folks, we offer a great opportunity for you to do that as a part of our community. This is important for mental health with our children and their families in the K-12 setting. So thank you for the work that you do in your community, serving our children, so that they can continue, so that we can continue to be resilient. Thank you so much.
My name is Isaac Martinez. I'm currently in Tucson, Arizona. I just started as a case manager. So thank you so much for sharing these exercises. Hopefully I can incorporate this with my youth. Also, it was just a good experience for myself. And as mental health service providers, I think it's important for us to just engage in workshops like this for our own self and our own mental health and our own growth. So I just want to say thank you all so much, and thank you to everyone for being here and just sharing space with us. It was a really beautiful workshop. Thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you for sharing. And that reminds me, like, that's how this all even started. It's just me running an Upward Bound program, and it was just mostly like focused on like you have to get them into college and all this stuff, but mental health was just such a huge part of it, and I just had to figure it out as I was going along. So working with the center now, I'm so grateful, because all of these things I had to learn just to keep myself alive. Like if you've ever flown, they're like, you got to put on your mask before you put on others. And so I'm really grateful to be able to share these things with you all too, because I know it's hard work and not everybody can do it. And you all were chosen for this work, and not everybody has that gift of connecting with people, and it's hard. So I'm glad it was able to help.
Thank you. And you're right about, mental health affecting us personally and our youth. And, sometimes their main concern may be their survival or, not be getting into college. So, and, I could relate to that. Thank you so much for all the work you do.
And then I saw your question, Joanne, about books. Maybe I can come up with a list of books that with the other presenters too, and those can get sent out. Because just the top of my head, I feel like just poetry by Joy Harjo really helped me. Just reading a lot of books, I think, is what helped what helped me on my journey, I would say. And I know someone had mentioned Brene Brown too in the chat too. And her, like, I really like reading her books, and I feel like that's been helpful too. Joy Harjo and then Brene Brown. But I'll think of some more too. Or maybe if you all have other books too, start a book club.
Thank you all for these great suggestions of books in the chat. I'm writing things down, and I agree with Tanea. We'll put together some kind of resource list for folks who are interested, and figure out a way for you to gather them and learn about them. And I know the ladies that Tanea mentions, Joy Harjo is Native. She's a wonderful representation of our communities. The same with Eduardo Duran, another Native author, very well known. And so I can't agree with you more. Brene Brown is just amazing. So it's important that we find people that can help us in our journey. These are just a few of them, and we'll continue to look for others. I'm not sure who writes Wisdom Daughters, but I'll look into that as well and find a way to share this resource with you all.
Have a good day.
Yes, everybody have a good journey today. Thank you all.